Good afternoon and a warm welcome, everybody. We are broadcasting live from UOB's Plaza Atrium. Delighted to see so many of you here with us, and a warm hello to you joining us at home. You are with us here at Money FM 89.3's post-budget ministerial roundtable for 2024. We'd love to get you involved in the conversation as well. I'll tell you how in a while. We're going to get right to it because we just have 60 minutes to dissect this budget, which many have applauded as a budget that started, well, maybe back in 2022 with the Forward Singapore listening exercise. Right, Ryan?
That's right, Michelle. It is the first installment of the nation's Forward Singapore report, and it is to ensure that the country can adjust and emerge stronger in a world that is set to become more fragmented and unpredictable in years to come.
Well, the budget's theme really rings out and hints at its mission, building a shared future together. And that's what we're going to dissect. But first, time to give a warm welcome to our special guest today. Indranee Rajah is Minister in the Prime Minister's Office. She's also Second Minister for Finance and National Development. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me. Happy to be here and wishing everybody a happy Chinese New Year.
We want to jump straight to what you think of the budget. Maybe if there was one message that you most want Singaporeans to take from this year's budget, what would that be?
Well, if I were to ask Singaporeans how to think of this budget, in one word, confidence. The budget has a whole range of measures, but all of which are designed to give Singaporeans confidence in themselves, confidence in the future. So the household measures give households confidence. Individuals can have confidence knowing that there are career progression plans in there for them. The ITE students can take confidence from the ITE Progression Award. Businesses can take confidence from the measures that have been announced because it's intended to boost businesses. And we can have also confidence in our energy transition, as well as confidence in fiscal prudence and sustainability. So yes, the takeaway word for this year's budget should be confidence.
All right, an exciting panel discussion coming up. So we have a lineup of experts joining us today. So on my left, I have Suan Teck. He is the head of research at UOB. Thank you for joining us, Teck. Thank you. And also on my right, Paulin Straughan, Professor of Sociology at the Singapore Management University. Thank you for joining us, Paulin.
I'm going to do things a little bit differently, gentlemen, so we make sure we get a sound check as well. Ignatius, could you introduce yourself?
Oh, hi, I'm Ignatius Loh. I help to run the radio, magazines and outdoor businesses at SPH. But my previous life, I was with the Straits Times. I was a business editor and I covered 12 budgets there.
So you might remember Ignatius Lame from his byline way in the past.
Hi, I'm Yuit. I'm president of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises.
Wonderful to have you here with us. We're definitely going to talk about small and medium enterprises and what they think they've gained from the budget and what they think maybe they'd like to see a little bit more of in just a while. But first, we're going to start off with the social aspect of the budget in just a bit. But we want to go around and hear from everybody's voice. If there is one word that you would use to describe this year's budget, what would it be and why?
I'll start. Aspirational. I think the budget is preparing us to receive a new Singapore demographic, and it's exciting. So we are challenged to rise to its potential.
Aspirational. On Teck, what is your one word?
Okay, the one word I will pick it up from Minister Indranee, starting with a C as well, but it's comprehensive. So a comprehensive budget. This covers, I think, in terms of households and individuals across the demographics in their major stages of their lives, and also businesses as well. And I think the more also very important part is a forward-looking nature of some of these measures. For example, for the new energy and also AI and other related measures.
Minister, you're absolved. So we'll move on to you. What is your one word?
Okay, speaking from the perspective of small and medium businesses, my one word is really uncertain. Right now, the market outlook is not clear. We are not sure how the rest of the year is going to be doing. From the budget perspective, there are some help. We have EFS that allows loans. There's also some concerns around, ability to transform. And some of the grants, is it really going to flow down to the SME that really relies on it to transform? And also manpower, right? We can share more that later.
Ignatius, what is your one word?
Okay, so I'm also going to take a leaf from the minister, but my word is not confidence, it's confident with a T, and that's a statement about the policymakers rather than the intended audience. Because I felt that this year's budget, I think, made a lot of very bold moves, right? And some of them are really big, for everything from, postulating even nuclear, energy generation for Singapore. And that can only come from a finance minister who is, number one, in full mastery, of the subjects that he and Lawrence Huang has been in charge of national development, he's reviewed the CPF, he's done, healthcare, right? Many, energy, for example, he was the EMC head. And also it reflects the fact that he's going to take the reins as the Prime Minister. So, it's a very good time to be in the finance ministry when the finance minister is empowered, and has the vision for Singapore. Because then, there's very good alignment between the national objectives and finance ministry's objectives, which makes for a very, very powerful and impactful budget, I think.
Confident budget. In fact, I've heard it described like the Michelle Yeoh movie, everything, everywhere, all at once.
Yeah, all these words represent a great snapshot of Budget 2024. So let's dive into some of the aspects. And among a slew of financial measures announced by DPM Lawrence Wong, we had a notable bulk of it coming through to address social issues raised during the Forward Singapore exercise. So let's talk about the modular package, Minister Indranee. About 1.6 million Singaporeans will benefit from the $8.2 billion being set aside for it. Even though the pioneer and medical generation will also benefit from this as well, could you help us understand why there's this huge focus this year on so-called young seniors?
Right. So as our population ages, we know that there will be more concerns about healthcare and making sure that there's provision for Singaporeans as they get older. At the same time, Singaporeans have different cohorts. The pioneer generation earned much less than the generations that came after them, more vulnerable. They were when Singapore was still developing. So for them, we needed a much bigger package geared towards that generation. And we set aside monies for that in the Pioneer Generation Fund. Then came the Merdeka generation. Merdeka generation benefited from some of the initiatives that we had during independence, when we started, with education, we started to bring in industrialization, good jobs. So the Merdeka cohort generally would have done better than the pioneers, but they also still need assistance because they didn't have as much to set aside. Then we've got what we call the young seniors, the modular generation, again having done better in terms of jobs and ability to save than Pioneer and Merdeka, but still with concerns ahead of them. So we want this group to also feel assured as they move through, at this life stage, right, for modular generation. You're actually not quite retired yet, but some are on the brink of retiring, some are planning ahead. We want them to have the assurance to know that healthcare measures have been set aside for them.
Teck, I'm sorry to out you, but you fall in the young seniors bracket. So can you share a personal reflection, maybe? How assured do you feel by this budget?
Okay, I think for this budget, particularly for the one on retirement account, right, for the CPF and all those, I think that measures clearly shows that the government has this in mind, right, how we are going to provide for ourselves in future. So I think this increasing the enhanced part of the retirement account, that's also one of these the areas that we can help ourselves in future, right? There's a choice for us at our retirement. And then of course the other one are those the assurance package, those items that help us tie through in terms of these cost of living expenses, higher expenses. Those will be very helpful because price levels have gone higher, right? I think any help from anywhere, especially from government, will be very, very useful.
Can I also chime in, because I'm also a young senior, just 1972, just made it, into the thing. Okay, so I'm always struck by the small details in the budget, right, which are thoughtful details, and in this budget, it arrived in the rebate of the stamp duty when an older person who wants to downsize from their property. So, a lot of people in my generation, property boom, right? So, started buying bigger and bigger and bigger properties. And then now, as we are getting older, some of us are single, and don't need to stay in a 3-bedroom or whatever, and want to downgrade. And so, when you buy a new property, you get ABSD, right? And so now, what the budget measure was that if you buy a new property, you pay ABSD. If you sell your bigger property within 6 months, the government rebates you the entire ABSD. And I think that's a small but very thoughtful way in which, the Majula generation, because this is the generation that is looking at downsizing, will benefit in a very real way on decisions that truly confront it, because this is what I'm thinking about now. So I think these small details, the thoughtful details, I think are very much appreciated.
Yeah, I'm going to bring you into this conversation, right? So you've got a hat as a business owner, and you also represent SMEs. So when you look at how things are playing out, we've got things like the Earn and Save bonus, where Singaporeans who work and earn up to $6,000 monthly will get a bonus of between $400 and $1,000 annually being put into their CPF retirement or special account. Is there a sign that perhaps we need to brace ourselves to work for longer?
I think, from the business perspective, we all know that we are quite manpower tight as a nation. So programs like that is really very welcome from the business perspective that can allow and encourage people who can and who is willing to continue to contribute to the workforce and allow the businesses to have access to the manpower. Apart from that, I was just sitting in a flexible working arrangement request committee, and we are all looking at ways in which we can allow more access to workforce and attract people who may not be working back into the workforce. And also, I think there's the other part that hopefully we can deal with, which is the total fertility rate. I think it's a topic that Minister is very passionate about as well.
And we will get into that in just a bit. I want to pick up on something Teck mentioned a while ago, and that is the rationalizing of the CPF accounts, the closure of the special account. We saw a lot of reaction to that over the weekend from the online community, the so-called CPF community, people who want to use a strategy that is no longer available to them. Iggy, what were your, Ignatius, what were your initial reactions to hearing the SA would be no more for those of us turning 55 from next year?
Okay, so I am a fiscal pragmatist. I feel that the government, especially now, needs to use its money, taxpayers' money, in the best possible way. And the old scheme allowed a retiree with money, to put a certain amount of the money in the SA, even after he retired, which he could withdraw at any time, but he would still be earning that higher interest rate. Now, this makes no sense actually, because if you were to go outside, in order to earn that higher interest rate, you would have to commit your money over a period of time. You had to buy an annuity at least. So in a way, the people that were doing the CPF shielding were getting an additional return by, for I won't say for nothing, but, for no good reason, in a way. And as a taxpayer, I would say, all the money that was, additional money that was paid to these people, we could have used that, in another way. Right? There could be competing users for that money. And I'd rather that it go to those competing users. Of course, they must be good users, but I urge Singaporeans who feel upset by this to really think of it this way, that the money will be used to benefit society, hopefully. Yeah.
Minister, I want to come to you on this hot button issue. So we may know the number of Singaporeans who have shielded, and that might be a small percentage of the CPF cohort, but what is less known is how many people were planning to shield. And so this group of Singaporeans may be disappointed by the news because they can't use this strategy anymore. What would you say to them?
I would say that it's not that you cannot use the strategy anymore. It's still available, but in a slightly different way. So as you know, we've got the ordinary account, the OA, then we've got the SA, right? And then we've got the retirement account, the RA. So for the SA, you have to leave the money there until 55 anyway. But I suppose the advantage is that currently it's liquid. But at the same time, you can leave it there and it earns the 4%. The key thing to bear in mind is that the budget announcements of the rationalization, the closure of the SA and transferring to the RA, actually it's 99% of CPF members are not affected. 99%. So that's a very large group not affected by this. Out of that 1%, actually, it is still possible for them to transfer some of the monies into the RA up to the maximum amount of the enhanced retirement sum, the ERS. So don't forget, in this budget, we also enhanced or increased the ERS up to 4 times. As you've got your basic retirement sum, then you've got the full retirement sum, then you can put the enhanced retirement sum, and all of this will be earning 4%, right? So they can actually max out the additional increase for 4 times. And the rest of it can go into the OA, which will earn 2.5. And if there's anything extra left over, that means that they have options to deal with it as they like, so they can put the money to good use in other avenues. And this is really for the 1%.
We're Money FM, so we love all that. Thank you.
Yeah, I think as we all get older, we start thinking more about our CPF accounts. And in Singapore, I believe 1 in 4 Singaporeans will be above the age of 65 come 2030. So that is a stark reality we have to face, Paulin. Now, we have $3.5 billion being put aside for the Age Well Singapore initiatives over the next decade to help seniors keep active and also access better care options. What is your view on what's being done so far? And this is against the backdrop of rising healthcare costs. Is there also enough being done for caregivers?
Well, I run the Center for Research on Successful Aging, ROSA, at SMU. And I must say that we were pretty excited that there was such a large amount that was ring-fenced, right, for looking after the well-being of post-65ers. So to say that we are going to be a super aged society in 2030, if you're not prepared, it's a scary thing for a small country like Singapore. So it means that if we don't work hard now and prepare the landscape, 1 in 4 will exit the workplace, and then we will dissipate into the invisible realm. And what a waste of human resource that would be, right? So I think there's so much potential that we're looking forward to in the COS debates to see how this money is, projected to help transform the landscape in Singapore. There's so many areas that we need to transform. First and foremost, the transformation of the workspace. Because right now, work is organized such that you work when you are 21, and then you retire when you are, 62 plus 63 plus 60, and so on. And then that's it, that's kind of step-by-step inch. And it doesn't allow Singaporeans to plan long-term. And that's because work is structured such that you work full-time or you don't work, right? So I think we need to revisit the meaning of work. And this is applicable to young Singaporeans as well. Because when you're 21 and you enter the workplace, you cannot imagine for the next 50 to 60 years, I'm going to be stuck in this kind of rut, right? And the second important transformation, of course, is the transformation of our health care. Our worry always is when people like me retire, I will join the polyclinic queue, right? Because my employer provides so well for group insurance, and we go into private space and all. But the moment we all retire, we have to rely on the public service. So we'd like to see the uplifting of the public service. Public health is doing very well, but I think it needs to be supported further. And the third, of course, is to ensure that our live space is transformed significantly so that it naturally allows and urges and nudges seniors to stay socially engaged and socially active so that you can fully leverage extended longevity. Thank you.
When it comes to retirement planning, I can imagine that's especially daunting for the lower income. So this budget has a whole suite of measures as it tries to tackle social inequality. I want to come to you for this, Teck. A lot of attention being paid to the ITE graduates and measures to help them offset the opportunity costs to still stay in education, complete their diploma, $5,000 to offset diploma costs, $10,000 in their OA once they graduate. But if the problem is wage differential, because the ITE grad diverges so much in terms of starting pay from the uni grad or the polytechnic grad, should we also be looking at what maybe employers can do in this equation? Because if there is a wage differential, isn't this about valuing different abilities?
Okay, I think this, Michelle, this question on wage differential, we have to be careful because we don't want to generalize, it has to be 2x, for example, or 3x is good, 2x is not so good, or whatever, or the other way. So we have to be careful because circumstances change and also the jobs are very different. So the important thing is that I think for whichever university graduate, ITE or Poly, I think it's a value add that we provide to the companies, to the society. I think that's where the starting point will be. And I think the initiative for the ITE and the rest of others to get additional, for example, another extra diploma. And that itself, I think, is a very good start. I think it's a very good initiative for those who want to upgrade and to add value, so to speak. And that will be the right thing to do. And then the rate differential will take care of itself once the value add shows itself. And so we should not be just focusing on the wage differential by itself, but rather to find out the root cause of it and how do we deal with it. How do we add value? How do we increase, for example, employability, etc. in future?
Yeah, talking about upgrading, right? One part of the budget really spoke to me because I'm in the age group. The Skills Future Credit for folks 40 and above, $4,000 of credit top up for you to reskill, upgrade, and maybe think about a second career. And I think this is where business owners have a point of view here. You run a business and you represent SMEs. Where are mindsets right now when it comes to letting workers go for training? Because on some level, some people might say, if I let my worker go for training, he might go somewhere else if I give him so much time.
Yeah, it's a great question. If you look at the budget, I think that there's a great focus around skills training, and I think that's a very good direction from a nation perspective. Now, if you take it down to the businesses, the question always for business is, well, is it a relevant skill set? Right, so I think that the strength of linking the skills training and making it relevant to the business is really, really important. And I think business have proven, and you do just a straw poll, that businesses will send their staff to training that is immediately relevant or very closely relevant to what their roles are about. And actually, businesses value the hands-on experience a lot more than a certification. So if we can look at it from that perspective, right, and we can look at this direction in terms of skill set training towards, is it going to make a difference to the skills that's required by the industry? I think that's really very important, because you do not want a case where people are taking up courses. And we've heard of like grooming courses, which is great, I think, for self-expression. But if it is not majorly going to be impacting the businesses and industry upgrade and GDP or increase in productivity, then is it going to impact our ability to compete in the longer run? And I think that's something we really got to think about. Now, relating to the above 40 training, right? I think we got to be careful to think about how would this impact the manpower movement? Because if it takes people out into training and they say, look, maybe I should now do a full-time diploma, and then that impacts the workforce available, that may be a bit of a challenge in the short run. So I think that's something we got to be mindful of, and if we can integrate it into workplace training to supplement the potential effects, I think that would really help.
All right, Paulin, I want to come to you. Some say, I'm a course junkie, so I love the Skills Future. Instead of $500 in 2 tranches, now $4,000, fantastic. Some say, though, this might rely on an old playbook that looks to qualifications as a means to upgrade yourself. What do you say to individuals who worry that the unintended side effect of the benefits might be to worsen the educational arms race here in Singapore?
Yeah, so that's why I say the budget is aspirational. I think the government has set the platform and has given all the resources in the various categories. It really is left to the rest of us to make good with it, right? So with regards to the push towards skills upgrading, that's essential because we live in a very volatile world, and post-COVID especially, we can't expect that the first career you have will be your last career, and we can't expect that the first qualification you have will serve you well for the next 10, 20, 40, 50 years, right? So we need to do this for ourselves, in partnership, of course, with employers, right? So I'm hearing from SMEs now, and I can feel your pain point, your worry. Oh my goodness, everybody's running off to take courses. What's going to happen to my office? So I think it takes a whole of society effort to ensure that no one gets left behind, simply because from the resource perspective, all we have in Singapore is us. And if a segment of us is left behind over time, then we lose an important part of the Singapore DNA. So when it comes to skills future and other kinds of training, I think there are two tenets, and I'd like to hear ministers' comments on this. The first, of course, is for us to stop chasing the paper qualification. I mean, that, to me, is one of the saddest things that we subject our children to, right? We have to stop chasing paper qualification to the point where everybody thinks that if I am not a degree holder, I'm stuck. So we have to demonstrate then that no one will be stuck just because you don't have a bachelor's. So here is the transformation of work then. How do we recognize workers and employees for the skill sets that they bring to the workplace that is beyond a paper qualification? And sometimes it could be just that you are a nice person and you get along with people. I'd love to have you on my team, right? And the second, of course, is to, I think, help employers to welcome these disruptions and to be able to tide through the disruptions when pockets of your workforce say, it's time for me to go, and they might say to you, I don't want to upskill according to your needs. I want to upskill based on my aspirations now, right? Minister?
Well, I'm really glad that you raised that, because it allows me to explain what has been happening for the last decade. We've actually, for the last 10 years, been on this journey where we are moving from just a pure paper qualification to skills-based abilities and talents. This is not to say that you don't have paper qualifications. You will still need it for some things. It's we are in professional services, you're doing medicine, you're doing engineering. You'd be very worried if the engineer certifying your building didn't have a qualification. If I were you, I would be seriously worried. But that's not to say that that's the only thing in life, right? And I can say with confidence the 10 years, because that was when I joined MOE. That's when I joined government. And we embarked first on Aspire, which morphed into Skills Future. And basically the journey or the transition that we've been making as a nation is this. It used to be that you got all the qualification or the skill that you needed when you left school, whether it be poly or university or ITE, and that was supposed to last you for the rest of your life. That was the old way of thinking. But it became very clear that with technological change, with social change, with different sort of norms, you need new skills as you go along. And so we started on that journey of changing the curriculum, both in ITE as well as in polytechnics, to make sure that it's not just the theory, but it was also infused with traineeships on the job training. That was step one. Then you remember when Mr. Tharman was the finance minister, he then introduced the Skills Future Credit, the first one, $500. Everybody was very excited about it. Now, $500, of course, may not get you a full-time course, but the key value of that $500 Skills Future Credit was to get everybody to internalize a new way of thinking that I can always learn. I must have a growth mindset, and throughout my life's journey, I can learn new things. Then you can see that we have over time added the Skills Future Award. And then now in this later budget, it takes it onto the next level, which is that whilst you're still working, you still have the opportunity to acquire new skills. And then with the idea of the diploma, which is the other budget measure, the idea of having the ability to do a diploma later, which is government funding, is that you build on whatever your existing base is. Your existing base could be ITE, it could be your poly diploma, it could be your university degree, and it will definitely be all the work experience that you have built up. And with all that, all those resources at your disposal, you add on another layer of skill. And the big takeaway that I hope all Singaporeans will have from this is that your value now and ability to grow extends beyond the old retirement configuration of age 55 or age 60. 55 or 60 is basically the end of chapter 1 of whatever you might have been doing. And there are many more chapters ahead, and what the government is doing is trying to put at your disposal tools, resources, so that you can acquire the skills to go on to chapter 2, 3, and, you know, and write many, many life stories.
Right, we're in the midst of our Budget 2024 conversations with Money FM 89.3. If you just join us, you can also ask your questions by scanning the QR code on the side of the stage, and that will bring you to a Pigeonhole platform. And if you're tuning in online, there's a pinned comment that you can get access to the Pigeonhole platform as well. So that's what we have right now. And coming up, we will be talking about businesses, in particular, how workers will benefit from Budget 2024.
Fantastic, but let's start with, you know, people have been talking about this, benefits for the involuntarily unemployed. All right, and this is something that the labor movement is really cheering.
That's right. So this is a new idea where we are looking at supporting folks who may be retrenched, who may be out of a job for various reasons. And as we speak, the government is working out the parameters of a new temporary financial support scheme to help retrenched workers as they undergo training or look for another job. Minister, what are some of the key factors that could be taken into account to ensure that people don't end up gaming the system?
Well, the details of this scheme will come out later, so I won't preempt that. But the main purpose of this, or the underlying intent, is for those who are involuntarily employed, meaning that they didn't resign of their own accord, you know, they're jobless through no fault of their own, is to help them tide over until they can get another job. And we recognize that some people may not have the savings, may not have the additional resources to see themselves through this period without some help. So that is the thinking behind it, in terms of safeguards and parameters to make sure that it doesn't become, you know, something that is taken advantage of. I think you would want to ensure that there are genuine efforts to search for jobs, that it is not permanent in nature, and at the same time is not taken alone, meaning it has to be coupled with all the other things like job retraining. You must give them access to that, helping them with job placement, upskilling, professional conversion programs. So you've got to do it in combination. Support whilst they don't have income, but at the same time, there must be genuine effort to try and find a new job and to facilitate that.
Paulin, I want to come to you on this for the social perspective. Is providing support to only the involuntarily unemployed problematic in a world where people are constantly trying to disrupt themselves? They may want to step out of the workforce because many reasons. They want to retrain for another job. They want to flee a toxic workplace. So should we also be thinking, and we're waiting for the details to unfold, should we also be thinking of including the voluntarily unemployed for good reason?
So I think that when we have social policies, right, you always have to think of serving average normal people who are not out to game the system, right? Those who are out to game the system, we suss them out and we take care of them, okay? Because we should not, you know, we should always think for the better good, right? So I think for this scheme, I thought it was a very important scheme because it is so difficult when you lose your job during retrenchment. I mean, the future is bleak, especially when you still have to pay bills while your income is not coming in. So I look forward to the details. I'm sure the government will, you know, package it with, I don't see it as welfare. I just see it as a stopgap support partnership while they are seeking new jobs and seeking new skills. Now, why is this an important scheme? Because we worry about families. We worry when the breadwinner is retrenched, and we worry about the children. So when you get stuck in the rut for too long, your perspective also changes. So another way of putting it is not gaming the system, but you see Singaporeans give up because they can't see the way out. And when they give up, their children suffer because then intergenerational transfers of poverty happens. So I think this is a very good measure that we have in place, and we look forward to the details.
Do you think there's room to expand it to not just the retrenched?
Let's not be greedy, because this is taxpayers' money. Let's take it one step at a time. And I do think that Singapore is learning how to support Singaporeans, right, through different challenges. And this is a big step forward for us. And we'll see how it goes, right?
Well, actually, in response to that question, it picks up on the question that Ryan asked. Because if it's not involuntary, meaning that you can choose to do it, then you could have gaming of the system. Because I can decide, even though today I have a job and I can work, I just decide that I won't because I want to try something else. And if the scheme then applies to someone like that, that person doesn't really need this support because that person has got options. Person can keep working. You could work, for example, and then take advantage of some of the other schemes to upskill at the same time. But this is for those who really need it because they need support whilst they are looking for other jobs, and they were put in this position not through a deliberate choice of their own.
Yeah, talking about systems, in the future we will be having a new tax system, and this is where we can come in, to weigh in on how businesses will have to adapt to this new future of a global minimum tax level of 15%. And for Singapore, we've benefited from this lever of having an effective tax rate below 15 for quite some time. So as things change, how do you see the new refundable investment credit coming in to play a part? Is that enough to offset it? Do you see businesses having to reposition or even reshore or place their profit centers elsewhere?
Hopefully we don't have to come to that stage that Singapore is not competitive enough and the tax rate is too high to have to reshore or go somewhere else. You certainly would want to see that. And the refundable investment credit, RIC, I think this idea for Singapore is new. And for other countries, some other countries already have similar system in place already. So it's not totally new. For the RIC to be useful, obviously, I think we need to have some way to compensate the company back or in terms of the tax that they pay because of the global minimum tax. We want to give back to them, but of course subject to certain conditions, right? There are conditions attached to all these things. For example, innovations and other factors. So this is one important step in order to meet the challenge of the global minimum tax, right? Because we have to implement it, no choice. And how do we offset the impact? How do we mitigate the impact, right? So the RIC will be one way to mitigate the impact. Of course, other factors also must come into play as well for Singapore to continue to stay competitive in other areas. Our labor force, our broad business conditions, and all the things, our costs of doing business here must be continue to be competitive in addition to these RIC and other related measures.
Yuit, on the broader point of competitiveness, what are you hearing on the ground from small and medium enterprises in terms of the sort of support they'd still like to see?
Yeah. So if you look at the overall direction of where we are headed as a nation, I think there are very real challenges in the technology space. AI and digitalization is really going to hit us as a nation. And as a result, you can see the budget allocation and on the top level, what's actually happening. I think that for businesses that are much smaller, we're talking about small and maybe micro and that kind of range, right? Businesses are still trying to do transformation. They're still trying to get their projects going. They're trying to improve their productivity. And some of them are seeing AI coming on and they are trying to figure out how to then tie it in with their productivity initiatives. Now, we are hoping that can get even more government support in terms of transformation. If you look at it, the workers are getting a lot of support to transform themselves. Now, I think that businesses, if we can actually incentivize them with a bit more support, currently most of the support grants have dropped to 50%, and for good reasons. At the same time, at 50%, it's going to be really tough for businesses going through a challenging economic situation to then continue considering investing and pivoting their business. And these are very real challenges, right? And if the industry can't make the shift, that's going to become a bit challenging for the businesses. And that's where we think that we could really do a bit better. Now, the other angle is that we see some positive moves, right, from Teck, where we are trying to encourage large enterprises to work more with small enterprises. But right now, we don't know the COS announcements. But the enhanced Teck is meant to kind of enhance the collaboration between large and small enterprises. Now, if we could look at, really improving the flow down of revenues, because we want market, right? The more business, the better it is. So if we can open up new markets for SMEs, improve collaboration between even the large local enterprises with SMEs, that will really make our economy stronger. And then the workforce will be well taken care of as well, right? And at the same time, we help transit the industry into the new future, addressing the SME space which are hiring more than 50% of our workforce. And I think that's really something that SMEs are looking at additional help.
Would you like to respond to any of that?
Well, I mean, the intent behind PAC is really that, to facilitate partnerships between the larger local companies to help bring along the smaller ones. So I think the key thing here is really how to operationalize it well, how to find the synergies, and how to ensure that the workflow is smooth. I mean, something very simple as the way a billing system. If one company does billing system in a different way, another one in another way, then your big MNC or your big Singapore company is used to having it done in a particular way so that you can bill the customer. Just something as small as this, sorting that out already makes a big difference. And then in terms of, what are your KPIs, your outlook, your business approach, your business plan, all of this requires time to build up. But the intent behind PAC is to be catalyzing. So for those that take it up and do well, we can use the learning lessons from this and see how to refine schemes like that and make it better, because the end goal, I think, is exactly as what Luke has outlined.
But Minister, could Singapore's government-linked companies take the lead, for example? Because when you go to other countries, you often see, the big Japanese companies, they'll source from the smaller companies, and they'll source Japanese. They'll fly Japanese airline. They'll stay in a Japanese-owned hotel, in a foreign destination. And some of these decisions flow down from the top, right? It's on principle. And of course, our government-linked companies need to produce that EVA, that the ministry wants, But in the overall scheme of things, couldn't you do a preferred sourcing? I mean, even if you go on Shopee today, this local seller preferred and everything, and we respond to that as consumers, and we do give, preference to that. So couldn't the same thing happen with some of the government companies and set the kind of example for the rest of the big corporations in Singapore? Because I think that will help a lot.
The government companies are actually already looking to see how we can do this better. So that's a question that crops up every year in Committee of Supply, and we give regular updates. But the bottom line is we are trying to make it more seamless and to help really the SMEs access the opportunities that are there.
All right, we just covered part 2, which looks at how budget is affecting businesses. If you just joined us, I'm Ryan Huang. Together with Michelle Martin, this is our Ministerial Roundtable for Money FM 89.3. Up next is part 3, where we take a look at the fiscal position for Singapore's economy and how budget has an impact on wider society.
All right, Teck, first question to you. Economists have been applauding the budget. Many have been talking about sustainability. Now, we know these are temporary measures. You can't have goodies every single year. Question is, when should the handouts be tapered off?
Okay, I think this, in terms of sustainability of all these programs and things like that, I think the important thing to note is that I think the thinking is very clear in the budget statement. The thinking is very clear. How do we afford all this? And also whether it's sustainable or not. First thing, very important is to have growth, economic growth, very important to generate the income, to generate the revenue, the tax revenue and all those things. And then of course there's another important element in order for us to afford all this, that is our reinvestment income that comes in, right? So it's a major, one of the major items in terms of the revenue, comparable to the corporate tax and all those, and it's number two, second largest source of income. So these are the two things that could afford us in terms of sustainability. Of course, in terms of the implementation of programs and all those, we have to be pragmatic as well and not to spend beyond our means. Right, you have to be very careful with our spending, and also just now the conversation on the unemployment so-called support for the unemployed, and all those things. We have to be careful with people gaming the system, and also proper enforcement and selection enforcement conditionalities, and very important to have all those in place so that the taxpayers' money can be used to the maximum benefit.
Yeah, like taking outline, Iggy, there's so many things you need to spend on, and the bills get bigger every year, budget gets bigger every year, and just to give you an idea of where the money is coming from, GST contributes about 15.7% of the operating revenue. When you look at all that coming together, given the importance of taxes, what's the possibility that we might see an increase in taxes or GST in the near future? What is that likelihood as we head into more pressing concerns, more bills to pay, and more programs that we might need?
It all depends on the fiscal position of the government and whether it's able to, get enough, conjure up enough revenue. And I suppose in the budget, we saw some indications that maybe this could happen. So for example, with the big energy master plan, we could be looking at huge expenditures down the line, right? But as I said, all this will depend on the ingenuity of the MOF in a way to sort of balance up and be able to plan in future for future revenue streams coming in. Some of it is out of its control. So for example, macroeconomic growth directly affects corporate taxes, for example. But even given all of that, it really depends on small things, like whether we pay extra interest rate, on the SA, for no good reason. All these little savings will, I think, help the ministry. But one thing that is helped the ministry a lot, I think, is the net investment income, which is not often talked about. We have a huge reserve, and that generates, even at small percentage or interest rate of 1 or 2%, a very healthy cash flow. And even though, I think current government is given allowed to use 50%, I believe, of NII, right? Even 50% of 2% of our foreign reserves annual return every year, even smoothed out over the years, is a lot of money. And I must say that here is where the previous governments, led by Minister Mentor, and have really gifted the current government with a lot of buffer, which actually staves off the need to increase taxes like GST. And I think we should be very grateful for that, and I think give credit, because I think that's a very big factor, I believe, Minister, right?
Minister, what would you say to a very man-on-the-street question of this is a fantastic budget, but who's paying for it, and how will Singapore continue to afford such budgets?
That's a great question, and thank you, because when you think about it, right, we're such a small country, no natural resources, no oil revenue, no agriculture. How have we managed to come up with a budget like this? And the answer is prudent fiscal management and ensuring that our revenues remain sustainable. So Ignatius touched on that, but let me just try and do this in under 5 minutes, okay? Basically, we run a balanced budget. So we try to make sure that whatever we need to spend, we generate enough revenue to meet that expenditure. What are our revenue streams? Taxes are a big part of it. So corporate tax, personal income tax, GST, all the various other smaller ones, and then about 20% or 1/5 of our revenue comes from what we call the NIRC, which is the net investment returns contribution. Basically what that is we have the reserves, right? So when we have the reserves, we project the income on the reserves, and 50% of that projected income every year is used for our budget. So that was something that was set up by Mr. Lee Kuan Yew and the finance ministers of the past to give us a steady revenue stream earning off the reserves without having to touch the principal. But the principal they set aside for emergencies. And we saw how you had to deploy the principal during COVID, because we used about 40 billion of the principal amount of our reserves to help us through the COVID period. But for the rest of it, we've got to see how we can try to keep the revenues going. And we have a few principles. For example, when something is like recurring expenditure like healthcare, we want to make sure that we have recurring revenue, because that way you can always keep it sustainable and you don't draw down, right, on something that you have saved up. So we projected, even before 2020, we projected ahead. We saw our population was aging. We saw that our healthcare needs would grow something to like about 0.8% of GDP, which was why we said we would need to raise GST, which would bring us about 0.7% of GDP. And we project long-term, give everybody advance notice, and we have now since put that in place. 1% last year, 1% kicked in this year. But we have other types of expenditure like infrastructure. That is long-term, very bulky, expensive infrastructure. When you have to pay out tens of billions, if not 100 billion, and you can't just pay just like that. Even when you're doing a house renovation, for example, you will save up, right? So we save up by putting those monies in specific infrastructure funds, for example. And then when we have other long-term expenditure like Pioneer Generation Package, Merdeka Generation Package, Majula Package, we also set aside the money. We put that into the Pioneer Generation Fund, the GST Fund, which we pay out GST payments every year, the Merdeka Fund, Majula Fund. So you can see that these are different strategies that we use, but when you combine it all, it means that we have enough to give out immediate short term, enough for the medium term, and some that we set aside for the long term.
Thank you so much for that really succinct overview. We're going to move to the part of the discussion where we talk about what was not in the budget. So, Paulin, I'm going to come to you. We know that over the years, you have championed aging singles, family-friendly policies. I wonder, were key elements of your wish list fulfilled in this budget?
Maybe this is for budget 2025. I do think that, with the change in Singapore population, we have been focusing a lot on the post-65ers, right? But there's another parallel transformation that's happening in Singapore, and that is the increase in the proportion of Singaporeans who are single by choice or circumstance. And also when you live longer, chances of losing your spouse and so forth is higher. I feel we don't really know the needs of our singles because we have not put our pulse on them, right? We have been serving families. We know they need money for childcare. We know that elder care is a concern. But along with elder care, many of our carers are singles, right? And in their minds now is what will happen to me? Now I'm taking care of my aged parents, but I'm single, and what will happen to me when I enter into, that stage of my life where I need help? So this is, in a way, long-term projection, but maybe not that long because many singles are heading in that direction right now. So I'd like to see us, have a better clarity on what singles need in their post-65ers, right? In their post-65 years when they retire, particularly in terms of self-care and their own caregiving. So here is where perhaps investment in infrastructure progresses, where we can think of communities, right, where we can buy into a unit inexpensively. And family, family is such an interesting construct. We always assume that it has to be blood children, blood everything. No need, all right? Because family could be good social ties that you built up. So The idea, of course, is to reconstitute and reconstruct the notion of family in a community, where you have, people who need to come together and want to come together, and how do we support that kind of infrastructure? Thank you.
All right, taking a quick one from you. I know you mentioned it's comprehensive, so I imagine you're quite happy. Anything that was missed?
Oh, anything missing? I think we talked about this just briefly just now. Maybe something along the baby bonus part. There's not much. There's no mention there. Is it because it's a year of the dragon? There's no need to have too much motivation for the. I don't know. Maybe minister has can respond to that.
Let me just touch on Pauline's part first, and I'll come to you. So I think it's spot on as far as singles are concerned. We have, in the last few years, had to pay a lot of attention to the 65ers and above. But we have started to look at issues for singles. In the recent years, we know that housing for singles is something that they have raised. The moves on the resale housing grant would extend to singles as well. And also with the estate reclassification scheme that PM announced in National Day Rally last year, and that we're currently still working on, and which will kick in around middle of this year. Singles can buy a two-room all across the island, no longer limited to non-mature estates like before. But we're still looking at the issue of singles to see what their needs are and better understand, I think, what in social terms it would be good to do. So this brings us back to the family measures. So two things. I mean, the short answer to your question is akan datang. Because if you look at Forward SG, in the Forward SG report, we said that, we need to make Singapore more family-friendly, more family-centric. We did one slew of measures in last year's budget. We enhanced the baby bonus cash. We increased paternity leave, voluntary paternity leave, by 2 weeks, and we have signaled that we will make it mandatory as soon as possible. We increased infant care leave, voluntary also, and then we also enhanced the child development account matching. So this is one set of measures, but what has become very clear is that this idea of either not marrying, choosing not to marry, or delaying marriage and then delaying having children is a global phenomenon. It's not just limited to Singapore. When you look at all the birth rates and the marriage rates across the world, there is something which is happening as a generational phenomenon, and it is global. And you cannot mandate or legislate that people must have children. But what we can and should do is try to create the conditions of having a Singapore that's made for families, a Singapore that is conducive to raising families so that people will want to have children. We'll have more Singaporeans wanting to raise children here in Singapore. And this goes beyond purely monetary measures. Cost of raising a child is important, but not the only thing. So apart from last year's range of measures, this year we've done a couple of things. The childcare fee caps, and also the provisional housing voucher, the PPHS voucher, to help those who are waiting for their BTOs but cannot get HDB provisional housing to get housing on the HDB housing on the open market. And we're studying various other measures, so more to come.
So I can only say that please don't wait for the next batch. Just do it.
All right, Iggy, I want to come to you because we saved the $1 million question of the day for you, which is, political watchers are wondering when the election is going to be called. To what extent do you think this budget sweetens the ground? Have you heard more yays as opposed to groans with this year's budget?
I think it's quite restrained in terms of like being a full-on election budget, I mean, it's got lots of bold moves, but they weren't sort of necessarily gallery-pleasing, so obviously gallery-pleasing moves. And I think that probably reflects, if I'm not wrong, Minister, a more mature kind of attitude towards electioneering. I'm not sure. Maybe. I find that we ask this question all the time. Like we asked this question last year, for example, and then it didn't turn out. So this year the pressure is there. I thought that in terms of getting votes, especially from the Gen Ys and the new generation, I thought last year's budget was actually better. It was more obvious, especially those living in the new towns and all that. With a slew of measures that were aimed at, alleviating family concerns than this year. So I wouldn't say that this was a particularly blockbuster election budget, but I don't know, others may have different views.
Chance for you to weigh in, Minister. So we do have to call for elections by November 2025. So I suppose we ask you this question every year. So
We try
it's quite
all the
cheeky of
time.
us.
Yeah, that's true. You always ask me the question, including immediately after an election. So I would say that this year's budget is a forward SG budget. An election budget, when people say the phrase election budget, implies something that you do just to be crowd-pleasing, which kind of implies a kind of a yo-yo type of effect, that you give a lot one year and then you don't give in others. But that's not how we've approached this year's budget. This year's budget, actually, you can map directly to all the plans in Forward SG. So if you look at the SG report, which came out last year, we have some very clear plans for the future of Singapore. So it's a clear, focused plan, and Budget 2024 gives effect to that plan in a very deliberate and measured way, because when you're planning for a country and you're planning for the future, you can't do it in sprints. It's like a marathon run. Some parts you're going to have to run faster, some parts you may have to run slower, but to bring the country forward, you need to be able to run a marathon at a sustained, even pace to get you through the course. And this is part one. And that's really what DPM Lawrence Wong has signaled. It's part one of a whole range of plans that we have to make sure that we have a better and brighter future.
The interesting thing about budgets is it gives you sort of perspective in terms of what the economic vision is of a party or a government. But as we look forward, I think it's interesting for this panel if maybe we can share what we think the new Singapore dream looks like. So I'm going to start with you. Yuit, what do you think the Singapore dream looks like? The 5 C's no longer relevant, I mean, from the small and medium business enterprise perspective.
Yeah. You know, I actually dream of this future where you have a steady stream of SMEs growing through the whole process and then becoming large local enterprises and making Singapore punch above its weight in the global scene. You know, that is really my dream. And how can we actually facilitate that through the skills training, workforce development, and transformational processes, and also collaboration. I think Singapore businesses amongst each other, between GLCs and ourselves, all can work better if we collaborate closer together. And then the other part, as a citizen, you know, I've got 5 kids, and I don't mind having one more if, you know, we get more baby bonuses. So I think I totally second Tekin, you know, bring it on as soon as possible. I would love that.
Don't wait.
Don't wait.
Iggy, I know your dream involves sports.
Yeah, no, so mine is a very specific dream, but it harks at the bigger problem. So after I saw this thing, right, forging a more united nation, build and rejuvenate sports facilities via the Sports Facilities Master Plan. So my immediate dream is for the Singapore Badminton Hall, the one where, you know, Lee Kuan Yew stood up and shouted Merdeka and everything, to be used for badminton. Okay, it's a very serious request because I used to be on the URA Conservation Advisory Panel for 10 years. And what we do there is we make sure that old buildings that evoke a sense of place for Singapore, very, very classic buildings, iconic in history, are conserved. You know, and that because it anchors the Singaporean's identity. If you can be in a place that he remembers from the past and not have the city keep changing and changing. And to me, the Singapore Badminton Hall in Guillemard Road is one of the iconic historical sites in Singapore. I don't know whether you all know what it's used for, because I live in Joo Chiat, so I drive past all the time. It's the annex for G-Spa, which is a 24-hour spa that sort of, you know, I don't know, offers other services as well. And it's been, in other times, it's been used as a place for prawning, you know, a prawning facility. And I think that's such a pity. And I once wrote to Minister Lawrence, when he was Minister for National Development, as a member of the conservation panel, and I said, Lawrence, you know, there is a shortage of badminton courts in Singapore. It is true. Because the moment it comes up in the community center, everybody like straight away book, and nobody can play badminton, right? So can't we just turn the Singapore Badminton Hall into a badminton hall, right? It was in the past. Why can't it be? And the answer is that it cannot, because the Singapore Badminton Hall is under the Sports Council, and the Sports Council, will not spend the extra money to refurbish an old place. They rather build a new place. And this morning, when I checked, I found that, to my disappointment, they have indeed built a new place, which they also call the Singapore Badminton Hall, but it is 700 meters up on Lorong 23 Geylang. Okay? So, I mean, to me, it's a missed opportunity. It's where MOF can practice a little bit more strategic finance planning and start to draw some of these finer sort of details together. But I mean, to me, it's just a small thing, But I think it's important for Singapore that the place that Lee Kuan Yew shouted Merdeka should not be used for prawning or be an annex to a 24-hour spa lah.
I pass by that place every day as well. It's a new restaurant that just opened last month. So you can check it out if you're in the area next time.
But it's quite sad lah, it looks quite sad.
All right, Paulin, let's bring it in. If you could sum up your Singapore dream in one word, what would it be?
It'll have to be 2 words. The first would be, for Singapore has always been a very youth-oriented society because we are a youthful nation. So I want my future Singapore to be one where Singaporeans will not be afraid of growing old and becoming redundant. And instead, we can all look forward to productive and engaged aging, and we will not be afraid of turning 65, 75, 85, and we can look forward to spending the rest of our lifespan in what we call home. The second, which is supremely important, is for Singaporeans, and this I speak to the younger Singaporeans, to be committed to stay engaged. Because I think, because Singapore is run so well, we have always relied on the government to do things, and then we learn how to complain. Me also, I complain a lot, right? But I think moving forward, we need to really be serious about being active stakeholders in our country, and we have to get engaged and learn to appreciate what makes the country work. Like the very fact that our budget is very different from budgets of other countries because it's very forward-looking. It doesn't just spend on what we can give you now, but invest in what we can do to prepare for the next 5, 10 years. You can't do things like that if you can't be certain that the central government will not change. So this is something that we've taken for granted. I think we need to reflect on it. And if this is the Singapore you want to remain stable, I think everybody has to play a part. Thank you.
Be engaged and step up. So, Teck, what do you think Singaporeans should strive to work towards as part of their Singapore dream? What do you have in your Singapore dream?
Singapore dream. I just want to end with in a very positive note. The word that comes up to me is that future Singapore dream is on the wall down there. It's the word abundance. Can you see? On the wall down is abundance. Really, for a country with really limited resources, we don't even have our own water, but we have a lot of things that are in our favor. And like what Paulin mentioned just now, I think we want to make sure that the young people don't take things for granted, but we do have a lot of resources available, actually, for us, for the young generation to move forward. Right? The government is doing all this future planning, and no other countries, I have to agree with Paulin, no other countries, the budgets that we look at have this sort of element to really build for the future. And then Singapore is very unique in that sense, and we want to really capitalize on that. And that will bring us the abundance and prosperity and success in future.
Spoken like a true researcher. All right, we've come to the end of a very engaging discussion. Before we wrap up, Minister, I wonder if you could share what sort of conversations you hope this budget will open up as we try to make the Singapore dream a reality.
Well, I hope that it revolves around the following. One, how to keep Singapore as a vibrant economy. Because honestly, you would not be able to do all the things that we can do if you don't have a vibrant economy. I mean, just look at it around us now. We're here at UOB Plaza. You see people walking back and forth purposefully. They're going to and from their offices. They're filled with purpose. There's a certain objective that they are working towards. And all of this is possible because they have jobs and they're clearly working for companies that have business prospects. And if you don't have this, Singapore would slow down. If we lose growth, the future would not be bright. So the first thing is vibrant economy. Second, I really hope that conversations revolve around how can we ensure that Singaporeans have fulfilled lives. So it's not just about working, meaning waking up in the morning and dragging yourself off to work. It's about how can we enjoy our work? How can we enjoy work and at the same time have families? It's also how can we find fulfillment in our work? How can we grow in our work? How can we look forward, as Paulin says, to our older years? And when we get to the older years, to realize that this isn't the end, this is just a new beginning. And so I hope that there's conversation around Age Well SG to realize that reaching 55 or 65 actually means unlocking whole new potential, different from before, but no less exciting and filled with opportunities. And then, of course, finally, I really, really hope that we can increase our TFR because without babies, there won't be Singaporeans, and without Singaporeans, it'll be very difficult to have Singapore as we know it. So as you say, don't wait for it, lah. Just do it.
I think this budget has done something really well, and that's confront FOBO. Have you heard FOBO? Fear of becoming obsolete. And this budget really has confronted FOBO in a very positive way. It's been described as such an optimistic budget. We've come to the end of our discussion. So great that so many of you have stuck on with us throughout. Thank you for being with us. Minister, especially, thank you for being here.
Thank you, and thank all of you for being here too on the panel.
And do stay tuned to Money FM 89.3 for more great conversations about what else? Your money. I'm Michelle Martin.
Of course, we want to give a big thank you to all panelists as well. It would have not been possible today without their help. And of course, on my left, once again, is Suan Teck. He's a head of research at UOB. And on my right, I have Paulin Straughan, Professor of Sociology at the Singapore Management University. And next to Michelle,
Ignatius Loh, you heard Ignatius rallying for a particular building here in Singapore, Editor-in-Chief for Lifestyle and Entertainment Media at SPH Media. And Yuit is President of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Thank you all for joining us.
thank you all. Let's give them a round of applause.